tropical brands.
Welcome back. You're still watching Tonight, and it's the time that I want us to have a proper conversation about the cities of the country, the making of cities, on a day that Eldoret municipality got the conferment to become a city. I'm still with Senator Moses Kajwang, the Senator of Homa Bay County. I'm with Juliet Rita from the Technical University of Kenya, but also an expert on matters infrastructure and urban planning. I also have Philip Kisia, who is the former town clerk of Nairobi City. But before we get there are several services that a municipality must show the potential of achieving for them to be named a city. First of all, the population is required to be at least 250,000. Of course, initially it was 500,000, but it was revised to that. And a city needs to have cemeteries and crematoria, or the potential to offer such services, electricity and gas reticulation, refuse collection, stadium and national stadium, a five-star hotel, guest houses, referral hospital, county hospital, constituent university campuses, county school, national school, training institution, polytechnic, international airport, solid waste management, a national hospital, and again, like I said, the national stadium. But there are so many other services that are detailed in the schedule within the law that is on urban areas and cities that we may not mention here. But before we took a break from the conversation, we were already talking about what it will take to afford the financing. And Juliet, you were telling us about what you have seen with the city of Nakuru. Maybe help us understand, because yes, Eldoret now has qualified for that city status. And if you look at the cities that have gone before it, including the Nairobi city, we still have challenges of planning, where services are, where residential areas are. How do they now fix it? Because already you're not starting from a clean slate. They've been there. What should that look like when it comes to you're now planning for a city, not just a municipality?
Well, that's a very interesting question, because if you go back in history a bit, you find all these cities, even before they became cities, there were towns, yeah? Looking like at Eldoret, very significant in terms of even the location of the railway station, the airport. We have the international airport, the airstrip, a very strategic way of having planned this town. And you find even the accommodation in terms of the housing, the areas which were located for the industrial areas, it was well planned. What has happened over time is you find this almost reactive way of development, where we have increased population, so we densify areas without properly planning for these areas and incorporating all the amenities and services that need to go together with the increased accommodation or housing that you're going to offer. All is not lost, as you asked in the question, in terms of what is it that we'll be looking at in terms of planning going forward now that we have given these areas cities status. And it is not all lost. We can still redeem. We have very many tools in terms of how we undertake planning. We have plans that already are guided by the Urban Areas and Cities Act, like the IDEPs. We do have plans that are guided by the Physical and Land Use Planning Act. But the thing we have to ask ourselves is, are we just going to prepare plans as we have been doing and putting them in shelves and then saying there's no budget to implement this plan? Because we have to tie resources to these plans so that they're not only plans, but they're also plans that are targeted at also opening up these areas for more economic opportunities. And that is the only way that we'll be able to achieve proper planning in our cities.
Right. And Senator Kajwang, if you look at the city of Nairobi, for instance, and I remember sometime, I think it was in February last year, when he saw Governor Sakaja and the president meeting with the Nairobi Rivers Commission, and they were talking about the challenge of waste management. They were talking about launching a program to clean up a river, the river basin, that is Ngong River, Mathare River, and Nairobi River itself. To date, Even C.S. Duale, who is now at the Environment Ministry, is still speaking about the same. What is this that becomes so difficult to deal with this issue of waste management that even smaller towns are struggling with? Eldoret City will have to deal with such a problem. What is it that we don't fix?
We have cartels. If you listen carefully to Sonko when he was governor of Nairobi, the area where he frequently talked about cartels was in waste management, this thing of garbage collection. It's a gold mine. There's gold in garbage, there's gold in waste. And so we've allowed cartels to capture that particular function in most of our cities and in most of our towns. But there's one mistake we made, and I think those of us in the legislature must go back and reflect on the Urban Areas and Cities Act. We said that the capital city shall be run as a county. Now, Nairobi is such a complex entity that if you're going to run it with the template of a county, the template with which you run Homa Bay, the template with which you run Tharaka Nithi or Isiolo, and I'm not saying that these are small counties. You cannot run Nairobi with the same template that you're running the other 46 counties. Because Nairobi is a capital city, Nairobi is a host of diplomatic missions, Nairobi is a host of several critical security and national logistical infrastructure. There was a little proviso in the Urban Areas and Cities Act that the two levels of government could come to an agreement on how they could co-finance and how they could co-develop infrastructure within Nairobi. And I think that gave rise to the Nairobi Metropolitan Authority and those kind of conversations. But it has not been followed faithfully. Nairobi is too important to be run by us politicians. The politicians can do the politics, but we need administrators and managers to run Nairobi properly. We were just discussing during the break, what is the role of planners in county governments? And she tells me that a planner in a county government would be at the director level, meaning that he has to report to a chief officer, who then reports to a CEC, who then reports to a governor. So the planners who are extremely critical in ensuring that there is order and there's sobriety in the overall development of a town or a municipality, they are at the lower, the outer layers of the onion. They are not close to power, so they never get listened to. And I think that those are some of the things we can cure in law. But then there are also other practical dimensions that for you to render a service, you need to charge for it. But for you to charge for it, people must see value out of it. Look at Nairobi. When I grew up in Nairobi, going to school in Jericho and perhaps living in Buruburu, there used to be Kanjo trucks that used to come to collect garbage. And I think it must have been on Saturday. There was a day when everyone would be putting the bins out, and you know that the Kanjo guys would come and take them away. But today, it has been privatized. You find all sorts of trucks in Nairobi stinking to high heavens, private players, and you don't even know where they're going to dump their waste. Sometimes you find waste dumped right behind your house. So Nairobians would pay if they're guaranteed that service. And I could give credence to the institution that was there before the county government took over. Because as you're saying, Nairobi was planned. The schools had a similar model, similar structure, similar plan. The hospitals had a similar plan. The estates were quite organized. There were certain services that were being rendered, such that if you taxed Nairobians, they would be happy because there would be corresponding service.
Right.
Today you pay rates, you pay taxes, you pay these things. Water has been privatized. We know estates in Eastlands where there's a parallel water network. There is a Nairobi sewage and water service network, and there's a private cartel network, perhaps most likely run by the MCAs and the political elites. They shut down the main line so that they can bill you on the other line. So we need to deal with those things, and those things do not require legislation. They just require firm leadership from those we have entrusted.
And if the Senate is aware about this, what action can it take?
Of course, we have a role in the oversight and pushing for some tough decisions to be made. And I think I cannot put the blame in Governor Sakaja's hands alone, because we must work in a complementary manner to ensure that he's got the resources to provide those services. But we also check him that once he has the money, he uses the money to do the right things. I think there's been a mismatch there. That every other year we'll be sending billions of shillings to Nairobi, but linking that money to service provision is a problem. Because sometimes you are told all that money goes into salaries.
Right.
I don't know what wage bill Kisia left in Nairobi, but today we are told that everything that is collected goes to pay salaries. Everything that is collected goes to service loans. There is a 5 billion loan that one governor took, whose interest every year is equivalent to what is being collected from Gikomba market. And it's just there. And the people in office are doing nothing about it.
Okay.
So, yes, we need to be more vigilant to demand service in return for payments. And that should be what applies in Nakuru and Eldoret, the new cities on the block.
And Philip, what is this problem in Nairobi? Because, like he says, garbage remains such a big concern. If you go into the inner towns or inner estates, you'll find that there's a common area where everyone goes to dump the waste or trash, if you want to call it. What is it so difficult for a government that is financed from both national level but also the on-source revenue, and those people that it serves actually paying some of these levies and fees?
Well, Sam, I get, quite shocked seeing the level of inefficiency since devolution started, because you just need to look at how much money was being transferred during our times when we ran this city as a city, not as a county. I remember during my last year in office, we received 2.9 billion shillings from the National Treasury. But we collected, I think, 3 or 4 times that amount. So what am I saying? During our times, we were able to collect money, and that money went into providing services to the people of Nairobi. The support that we received from the national government was very minimal. Now, back to your question. Why do we still have a problem of solid waste management? By the time we were leaving office, together with JICA, we had put in place a master plan that was meant to deal with this issue of solid waste management once and for all. Okay? We had even done a feasibility study for it. The plan did propose on how collection would be done from source, separation, transportation, and eventual disposal. Right now, the solid waste that is collected from Nairobi is actually just being dumped. Mm-hmm. The dumping method of disposing of solid waste is something of the last century. But we find that in our capital city, we're still applying that method of disposing of solid waste. So there is need for those who are in leadership to make a decision. Do they want to serve the people of Nairobi? And it's as simple as this. The plan is already there. The government of Japan spent millions of shillings to put up that plan. From the time we left office, there's been nobody who has been keen in implementing that plan, okay? Because the plan was to, first of all, change the method of disposal, of course, getting a better way of transporting the solid waste from source to the final disposal area, applying modern methods of disposing of the waste, mm-hmm. and of course using some of that waste to generate other byproducts like electricity and so on and so forth. So if you ask me, it is the leadership that has been there that has refused to implement the plan. The plan is there. The money to implement the plan was going to be availed by the government of JICA and Japan. And I remember when, by the time we were leaving office, we had already signed a memorandum with the government of Japan for financial assistance. At that time, to implement that plan, it was going to cost us about 17 billion. Transportation, disposal, and creating a landfill. Mm-hmm. And of course, generating power out of the waste that was being generated by Nairobians.
Right.
So it's not about the cartels. These cartels that people keep talking about are human beings. They are people. They are not ghosts. They don't live in hell. They live in Nairobi, or they live in whatever county. If you are the governor, why can't you deal with them? Why are you afraid of dealing with those so-called cartels? Deal with them the way we dealt with them. And I remember we were able to improve solid waste management. We were able to improve solid waste management collection from, I think by the time we were leaving office, we were doing about 18,000 tons per day. 1,800 tons per day.
What is that formula that the government of Nairobi can actually use to deal with the so-called cartels that are humans?
You see, these are human beings.
Yeah.
There are two things you can do. You either become part of the cartels and then you ignore the problem, you refuse to deal with the problem, or you decide you are going to deal with the problem. And the first thing is to disassociate yourself from the cartels. Because these so-called cartels are people who have made billions of shillings from solid waste management. So there are people who never want to see this program working. So as a person who is at the top, you make a decision. Do I want to continue seeing solid waste mismanaged, or do I want to deal with the problem? The plan is there. Why can't you implement? At least when we took over, there was no plan. But by the time we were leaving office, there was a plan. So those who came after us should have implemented the plan.
Okay.
JICA was there to support. Why on earth did those who came after us refuse to work with JICA to implement this plan?
And Juliet, the residents of whichever city, now there are 5, all they need is service. And they'll use the service provider who is available. So for the case of Nairobi, like Philip is referring to, what are the options here? Because it obviously costs money to have vehicles that are supposed to be doing the collection of the waste, of the waste itself, and even to transport it and eventually do the disposal. What are the options?
Let's start with the real deal in all this, the dilemma itself. As Kisia has said, rightfully so, is the tragedy of our system is that we sort of like reached a point where we surrendered public services to the private sector with the notion or the idea of hiding behind public-private partnerships or bringing in the private sector. But to be very honest, you travel around, you look at other models that work, there are some key critical services that have to be provided by the public sector because it is very critical and it also directs how a city grows and functions. Case in point, of course, is the solid waste management, public transportation, electricity, water supply, and education and healthcare. The tragedy is we have also accepted as citizens, as a people, that it is okay to go back to our pockets and pay for a private service, yet we pay our taxes and our rates to the county government and the national government. We have to acknowledge that even as we are looking at cities, and I love the idea by the senator here, is we can have a city in each and every county in this country. But we cannot achieve this, and it doesn't make sense if we continue having the critical services that are key and vital for the functioning of the city being provided by the private sector. And we have to look at it at a broader area because we cannot say of competing, even regionally, if our cities are dirty, we are not handling our waste, if we are not providing proper public transportation, we can no longer ignore that our cities are not doing so well. You go to Dar es Salaam, you go to Kigali, and you have people who are basically happy because they get to work on timely hours, they don't spend so much time in traffic, they are more productive, they're happier, they're going to deliver. So if you're setting up a company, you will look for such a city where it's clean, people are happy, and things are moving. So it's not just about the investment in terms of providing these services, but also the benefits that you reap generally in terms of even the benefits economically on the GDP, on the national scale.
And Senator, obviously, one would have expected that cities would be centers of production, that you want to see tech hubs coming up, you want to see business thriving in those areas. If you're to focus on the question of public transport, in Nairobi, yes, you have it, but it's run by private entities. Several Kenyans in the city use private vehicles to move. If you go to Eldoret, you find an almost similar situation. Is there a plan that you'd say one day there'll be proper public transport that is public driven, not private?
It is very possible. And I feel sorry for the Gen Zs who did not experience the time when public transport worked in Nairobi, when Kenya Bus Service worked on schedule, when a number 34 bus would leave Otiende at 6:30 in the morning, and you are sure that by 7:30 it is at JKIA going through Jogoo Road. There was a time when those things used to work. There was a time when we had the Nyayo Bus Services, which also worked fairly efficiently. I think what brought down Nyayo Bus Service was financial management by the people who are sitting in the back office. But the front-facing part was working. There was that time in Kenya. Public transport can work. Bus rapid transit, or what we call BRT, has worked in African countries. You go to Dar es Salaam, they are rolling it out in phases. That's one area where our brothers from Tanzania say that at least they've got one gold over Kenya. We can win gold at the Olympic, but at least they're winning gold when it comes to modernization of transport in Dar es Salaam. You go to Johannesburg, when South Africa was to host the World Cup, the public transport system in Johannesburg, in South Africa, was chaotic. Because their version of matatus, the economic appetite that was there, matatus was the province of the black Africans. And it was chaotic, it was mafia, it was people used to kill each other. They made a conscious decision that if the world is going to converge in South Africa for World Cup, they needed a modern transport system. And there are enough case studies that can help Nairobi to transit from the chaos that we have today of matatus to an organized and civilized public transport system. The traffic jams we have is because of that chaos, where you have 100 Ubers carrying 100 people instead of one bus carrying 100 people. It is self-inflicted. It is because the county government and the national government does not want to talk and does not want to focus. You have NAMATA, Nairobi Metropolitan Area Transport Authority. We are not seeing any outcome out of that. And I thought that it was a very brilliant idea to set up a NAMATA, because we thought that this would be the body that would drive the public transport agenda beyond Nairobi City County to the Nairobi metropolis. Right. You've got the Kenya Railways, which would have done the rail last mile connectivity. And you've seen the stories that came out in the papers last weekend about the units that came from Spain that are not functional. We just do not want to make the hard decisions, because when we make the hard decisions, as it was in South Africa, in Johannesburg, the political class felt that their support base, which were the matatu operators, and there was serious mafia. They are the ones who used to come out when there were strikes, when there were protests. They felt that those people lose control. But what did they do? They set up a public transport system, and then those operators bought shares. They got shares, they got a stake in it, they became the operators of the new vehicles, they became the operators of the new service. Today, our biggest problem in having an organized public transport system are the matatus. Because the matatu owners, in one, they say, we own this town, we own this city, we are the ones who voted this government, so you must allow us to continue operating the way we're operating. The way the transport system in Nairobi operates is not befitting of a modern capital that hosts a United Nations headquarters. Governor Sakaja, unfortunately, with the resources he has, he does not have enough money to set up a proper BRT system in this capital. He must work with the national government. Right. And we must find that interface. And I am not very averse to a Nairobi Metropolitan Service. Right. As long as it is not run by the military, as long as it's not shrouded in mystery, as long as the accounting is not done in State House. Nairobi Metropolitan Service was a good idea to complement, to bring technical skills to a political establishment. Unfortunately, almost 100 billion shillings was sunk into it. And today, as the chair of the Public Accounts Committee, I can tell you I have no visibility on where that money went. We must find a way of supporting the political class to run Nairobi, to make those tough decisions. Public transport is a public good. The state must step in. And we are not saying we are socialist. Right. Solid waste management is a public good. The state must step in. The reason why it's lucrative is because these guys have come up with a system of weigh bridges that at the end of the day, you declare that I transported 20 tons of garbage. There is no evidence. There is no oversight. There is no accountability. Okay. People are making billions of shillings in a year for transporting air, not even waste.
And Philip, yet they are supposed to be dealing with air pollution. Now, if you look at the process of declaring an area to be a city, there are several processes. So municipality board resolution, but then after that it goes to the county executive committee. Then after that there's an ad hoc team, you'd say a team of professionals. After that it goes to the county assembly, the Senate, then the Senate to the president. So there's a lot of layers that are political in nature. Is it possible, because again the law says that the residents in a city will have to be heard, that whatever decisions are being made, they will be heard. Is it possible in a heavily political process for them to really get to that point? And I don't know if you've been able to reflect on what has happened in Nakuru?
Sam, just before I dive into your question, I think I just want to add something to what Senator Kajwanga said. Sometimes I get a little bit surprised. We talk about a challenge as if it has just occurred yesterday. The challenge we're facing in terms of public transport in Nairobi has been there for some time. And I'm sorry, I'll keep on referring you to JICA. The master plan we have for Nairobi that was launched, that we did with my team, that was launched by Evans Kidero in 2014, expires in 2040. I don't know what are the milestones that have been achieved, but let me specifically talk about public transport. If you read that plan, and I'm sure the Senate has that plan, if you don't have, I think you need to make an effort to read it. It really gets into detail on how we can deal with the issue of public transport. It talks about modernization of the current rail system that we have in Nairobi. Expansion and modernization. I think those are the coaches we're talking about, or the engines we're talking about. But talks about just expanding them, modernizing, and using them, because they're able to carry more passengers at a go. It talks about introducing the bus rapid transport system that President Uhuru tried to introduce, and then it just failed. Creating dedicated public lanes for this bus rapid transport system to work. That has failed. The same plan talks about introducing, and the plan is already there, introducing a light rail system in Nairobi. The plans are there, the drawings are there, there's nobody to implement. So the problem is not that we don't know what needs to be done. What we need to do has already been clearly spelled out by those who were there before. Those who came after have failed to implement. And Senator Kajwang, you're one of the most active senators in Senate. I would request that the Senate looks at this plan that was done by JICA, which spent millions of shillings. It is sad that time has passed from the time it was officially launched by Governor Kidero. Nothing has been done other than spending money on buying coaches from South Africa and so on and so forth. But let's get back to, the Urban Areas and Cities Act. It clearly spells out what should be done before an area is declared a city. Forget about the very high benchmark that was set by those of us who are in the political class. It was very high. Because if you look at what has been spelled out in Schedule 1, not even 20% has been met. But the area has been declared a city. So that notwithstanding, we have put the cart before the horse. We now need to deal with it. And that's why I said that we now really need, as a people, as a government, to invest in the 5 cities that now we have. Cities alone, by just declaring an area a city, it does not become a city. There are things that are precedent. for it to become a city, not by just calling it a city. So I don't think that has been adequate public participation in anything. You know, and even when the public participates, their views are never taken into account. And Senator Kajwang is here, can tell you that I doubt whether they really look at the memorandums that are presented by citizens. You know, and even if they look at them, they're ignored. And I'm sure if people really understood the benefits of having an area declared a city, there would be more public participation, there would be more contribution, because the benefits will be spelled out. But right now, they see this animal called a city as something that is coming to work against them. That's something that is coming to impose more taxation, something that will not bring any benefit to the people of that particular jurisdiction. So there's need to have a lot of
services cost
education.
Money,
services cost money,
yep.
But how can you start charging before you provide the services, Sam? The services are not there. I mean, for you to declare a city, forget about the big infrastructure issues you're talking about, like the road infrastructure, drainage system, solid waste management, and so on, you know, electricity and so on, water and what have you. Basic things like libraries. A city is supposed to have an airport. A city is supposed to have, you know, a disaster management strategy, ambulances and so forth. A city is supposed to have healthcare centers, which they don't have. So these are areas declared cities just by name, but in actual sense, they're just towns.
All right, and of course, I think it's last night, there was a fire in Kibera, and there were challenges there in containing it, so much so that a lot of the property was consumed. Right there has been several incidents in the city of Nairobi. Of course, different towns and municipalities have also been reporting different challenges, but there was a tour of the Senate Committee on Devolution to Eldoret. I believe it was in August last year, and they were able to visit different services, including one on firefighting. We're taking a short break. When we come back, we'll be taking a look at your feedback at Citizen TV Kenya, at Sam Gituku. The hashtag to use is Citizen tonight. I will be raising some of those and getting some quick responses from the panelists here in studio. Stay tuned.